Welcome, everybody. We have some folks trickling in, I see. We're going to hang out with these tunes for a bit. Enjoy. They're by Jeannine, one of our panelists. Oro 5 is their project. So enjoy. We're going to let a couple more minutes go by and then we'll kick it off. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know your name, your pronouns, your land acknowledgements, where you're coming in from, your organization, and why you're excited to be here today. Welcome. Seeing some familiar faces in here. Welcome, Benny. Thank you for joining us. The Alley Center here. Welcome, welcome. Some of our partners, Maritza, see you too. Welcome. Again, just a quick reminder to not be shy. Drop your name, your pronouns, what organization you're with, the land that you're calling in from today, and why you're excited. Welcome. We will never loot more than you stole. Amazing. Thank you. That was, again, a track by Oro 5 by one of our panelists, Jeannine, who's joined us here today. More folks will be coming in, but just for the sake of time so that we can get some quality time with all of our panelists, let's get started. So just wanted to welcome you all. Thank you for joining us. This talk, again, is about how arts and culture practices can build our movements and inspire action. It can be tricky to connect people's hearts and heads to our issues, and that's why we're thrilled and grateful to have you all and our partners join us today. As folks, we're all working toward environmental and water justice. It's important to meet people where they're at, both like in person in their communities and creating space and place, and also online. So how can we do this, but not just, produce these works, but how can we work more equitably with the folks who are creating this and centering their leadership and their lived experiences, especially as we want to prioritize to center the experience of folks most impacted by these injustices that we're all working to change. And so that's why we're all here today, to learn from both practitioners and organizers who have this deep experience working with communities, and can't wait to jump in. Sade, you're on.
Awesome, thanks Jess. And now just a couple of quick intros, just for folks who aren't familiar with us or our work. The Water Hub is a project of Climate Nexus that offers communications and digital support for movement organizations working on water in the United States. We're focused on honoring the voices, concerns, and solutions of frontline communities and those impacted by water justice issues, including access to safe and affordable water, climate change's effect on water, and community resilience. Today's conversation will be led by our digital director, Jessica Jewell. I am Sade Moore, a communications associate here at the Water Hub, and I will be managing our chat. So throughout today's conversation, please drop any comments or questions into the chat. At the end of our panel discussion, we will have 25 minutes dedicated to Q&A. So throughout the discussion, feel free to drop those. But let's get started with an icebreaker. So we want to know what artists you're into, what artists you can't get enough of, any kind of artist from any space. Personally, I love Kayembe. I'm super into poets like Rudy Francisco. He has a great track called When the Water is Gone. And I'm also super into Maddie Matlines, another poet that I love. She does a lot of work around climate and views from a feminist lens, which of course we can't get enough of. But what about you, Jess? Any artists that you guys love?
Well, I recently had the pleasure of seeing Arouj Aftab this past week or two, who is a neo-Sufi poet and artist. She performed here in LA, where I'm calling in from, on Tongaland, and was incredible, haunting, beautiful voice, and actually is the first Pakistani person to win a Grammy. So highly recommend you check her out. I see that we have some folks that are answering in our Slido. Again, use the QR code or use your phone to check out the URL and drop in who you're listening to or reading or what have you. Any kind of artist, any medium, let us know to warm it up.
Perfect. We have Bravina, Solange. If I say any name wrong, I totally apologize. You have Ballad Red. And is it Salt? We have some in the chat. Salida Garcia Rawls. Sir, very familiar. Oh, A Tribe Called Red. Khalida. Yes, Erica Badu. How could we never forget her? Smino, Janae Eco, big fan. Is it Anna Tio?
We love to see it. Thank you, everybody. Oh, your 8-year-old daughter. I love that. Whoever shared that, thank you. Love it. Yeah, anyway, we just wanted to get the creative juices flowing and get to know everybody and who they're into, what they're into, as we start our conversation with these incredible artists and organizers to warm us up. Seeing more come in, queer artists, feminist artists, love it. Anyway, we can move on, but just wanted to welcome folks to continue to drop their favorites. Oh, I see Bomba Estéreo in the chat. Personal favorite, played Somos Dos at my wedding. Shout out to that. So anyway, thanks everybody for sharing. Let's see. So thanks again. Just wanted to start getting us going. So that was great. Thanks everyone for sharing. Let's go around the room real quick to meet our panelists today. Can y'all share your name, pronouns, organization, the land that you're calling in from, and why you felt called to join us all today?
I don't know if we're going in order, Jessica, but hi everyone, Axel Santana, associate at PolicyLink, he, him, his pronouns. I'm on Ohlone land in the Bay Area in California. And excited to be here today. And I think what excites me the most is really being in conversation with artists and creatives and just sort of being re-energized to the work. I think we sometimes get, stuck in the policy rut sometimes, those of us in that space. And so always looking for an excuse to talk about creation and art. And so really looking forward to that conversation today.
Buju, Asanuikwe Indishnakas, Gawababigani Kagandunjaba, Ajajakandudame. Hello, my name's Ashley Fairbanks. I use she, her pronouns. I'm Anishinaabe from the White Earth Nation up near the Canadian border, but I live on the opposite side of the country in San Antonio, Texas. I grew up in Minneapolis. And I'm the creative director for the 100% campaign, which is a campaign for clean energy, 100% clean energy in Minnesota. And I also do digital for Honor the Earth, as well as just a lot of digital and branding work, creative direction for all kinds of movement organizations.
Gwati Sehopa Dawashawashrab Mohenome Gatkaya Shatsanu Koyawashi. My name is Marcus Trujillo. My pronouns are he, him, and I am from the Pueblo of Laguna, one of 19 tribes of New Mexico. of 19 pueblos of New Mexico, and I currently work with the Office of Laguna Learning, and I am a full-time graphic designer. I work here in my tribe, and that's where I'm actually calling in from right now, is my ancestral lands of our Laguna people. In our language, we say Koekhanu. And I am also owner of my freelance project right now too. It's Hot Sea Designs, and where I focus on graphic design and illustration.
Hey everyone, Jeannine Kayembe Oro here. I'm with the Center for Cultural Power. I'm the Senior Program Manager of Climate Justice. I'm calling in from Chemehuevi land, which is outside of Joshua Tree, California. My people are from Kasai, Congo, and from Mindoro, Philippines. And I'm a musician. I call myself an infinite media artist because my ancestors have blessed me with an artistic vision and artistic practice as my life. So I'm just excited to be here in fellowship with other artists today and other folks who are at the center and intersection of climate and art, because that's where I live. So thank you everyone for joining us today.
You're on mute, Jessica.
Thank you. Anyway, thank you everybody for sharing a little bit about yourselves. If we could get started, I would love to hear first from Axel. So Axel, can you tell us a little bit about what PolicyLink does and how it centers creators, artists, and culture in its work?
Yeah, thanks, Jess. So PolicyLink is a national nonprofit organization focused on racial and economic equity. And we do this through research, communications, and advocacy work. Some of our issues that we focus on include transportation, housing, infrastructure, economic justice, and water equity and climate resilience. And the water equity and climate resilience work has really been a fruitful program where we've been able to meaningfully infuse arts and culture into our broader strategy. And some of the ways that we've centered and helped support artists and creatives is thinking about artists and creatives as more than just entertainers and healers. As important as that is, we see them as builders and innovators, and we really think about how we should be working more closely with them to create the world that we want to see through our equity and policy work. And so over the last decade or so at PolicyLink, some of our colleagues, Jeremy, Kalima, and Victor, who some of you may know, started the Arts and Culture and Equitable Development Program. And it was really set up to start thinking about how to collaborate with artists and creatives on equitable development of communities. And we worked with a cohort of creatives and arts organizations who were wanting to do more community development work in their communities. And this process really taught us the value of what arts and creatives bring to the work. And it's more than just aesthetically pleasing art. Really, local artists come with creative and culturally rooted solutions that might not have been tried before to many of our old, planning, legal, or political challenges. And we're really, just excited and engaged by that. And so over the last few years, we've done several collaborations, including with artists like Scribe Called Quest and Jason Foster, who helped us do a series of poetry workshops and they also turned that into a film entitled Many Fires This Time, which maybe some of you have seen. And then most recently, we worked with Benny Starr and Mika Gadsden, as well as Nana Fofie on some things I think we'll get into in a bit. But really, this Arts and Culture and Equitable Development Program at PolicyLink was always trying to figure out how to better and more meaningfully collaborate with artists. And, of course, we're not perfect and we still have plenty to figure out, but I think now more than before, our programs are better at thinking about the role of arts and culture strategies in their work. And we try to think about how to infuse those strategies throughout our programmatic work at PolicyLink.
Thanks so much for that, Axel. That's actually a great segue because I do want to touch on the curriculum that you developed. Again, shout out to Benny. I see that he's here. Thank you for joining us. So one of those projects that you mentioned briefly was a curriculum that you put together for the Water Equity and Climate Resilience Caucus and helped with that creation, which PolicyLink is a co-chair of. So the artists that you collaborated with on this were Benny Starr, Mika Gadsden, and Nana Fofier. Could you tell a little bit more about what this project was and what you learned?
Yeah, for sure. Shout out to Benny in the audience. Good to have you. So yeah, it was a really exciting project that we worked on with these folks out of South Carolina. Benny is a hip hop artist, rapper, and activist, and Mika Gadsden is a cultural activist, and Nana Fofia is out of New Orleans, a spiritual healer and a cultural organizer, and was really sort of our advisor on this project. But we all worked together, to put together a podcast that highlighted some of the amazing work of our Water Equity and Climate Resilience Caucus members, which I can share a link to in the chat when I'm done speaking. But as you mentioned, that's co-chaired by PolicyLink and the Gulf Coast Center for Law and Policy out of Louisiana. And we also worked together to create a curriculum that lays out some of the principles and promising practices of collaborations between arts and creatives, and institutions and organizations. And it really taught us how to value contributions from artists in a meaningful and non-extractive way. Something that, Benny often says, and that really resonates with me, is it's not just about the product or the deliverable, but the process and the journey is, just as, if not more important than just the product itself. And so, of course, there are plenty of artists in this conversation, and not to speak for them, but I think we often hear that they're brought into these planning and designing portions towards the end of a project or an event. And it's, usually just to add some flair, to paint this mural or play this song or perform this dance. But I think what some of this process has taught us is it's really a reminder that we get stuck in this policy and planning and legal world, as I mentioned before. And we think that maybe artists can't contribute to the conversation if they didn't go to school in this field or whatever. But it's, as I mentioned, a reminder to realize that artists have a way of thinking and taking and wonky, technical, and often boring concepts and creating digestible pieces or clips or works of art that many people can more easily understand and feel, really, which is an important thing that they bring is the feeling to the work. And so it's just a reminder of the human and emotional and cultural aspects of the work, which we can often forget in these spaces, especially on a topic as relevant as water, which is, has such a humanistic element to it.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. To wrap it up, do you have any advice for organizations looking to infuse more art in their movement strategies and how they can do that more equitably? You started to touch on it, but would love to hear some more clear examples or tips that you have to make sure that those relationships are equitable.
Yeah, I would love to plug the curriculum here, and we can also share a link to that as well. And I'm sure in a follow-up email we can share that as well. But I think I would really want to emphasize the importance of bringing in artists very early on. At the very beginning of any project or whatever you want to create together, just to dream up what can be done together, just to make sure that their perspectives are included from the jump. It shows that you really value all of their contributions, their thinking, the process, and you respect that, and not just, are checking off a box for the product or deliverable that they can contribute at the end. And then, that'll help you pursue the project together, even if it means you have to fundraise together. You can create a vision, dream it up, and then, go seek funding for that instead of always letting a funder, decide or assign what they think the best use of those funds might be. And I think we have seen that it makes for a much more meaningful collaboration and more sustainable impact of the work. And really just at the end of the day, it's about relationships, right? So creating better relationships and bonds between artists and organizations, which, can just be more impactful in the long run.
Thanks so much, Axel. That was super helpful. To transition, let's start next with Ashley. Ashley, you're from the White Earth Reservation, like you mentioned, and that you also grew up in Minneapolis. Can you share how the experience of living in these two different spaces shaped you and your work and your commitment to movement?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's incredibly important that I came from a city that has an incredibly strong history of movement art practices. Thanks to a lot of incredible people in Minneapolis, like Ricardo Levins Morales, my mentor, Shaka Mkali, just tons of artists who, it's amazing to like go to like creative time and they're like, here's all these new things you can do to engage people around the arts. And I'm like, this is stuff that's so normal in Minneapolis. Like we would never paint murals on buildings without talking to all the people who live in the neighborhood and like getting them to also like paint with us and join the project. So I love that I grew up with that baseline. And I grew up in this kind of like weird kind of anarchist hippie DIY community on the West Bank in Minneapolis. So art was just always a part of what we did as a people. And then on my reservation, a lot of it's the same way, right? So it's not like movement art in that way, but with Anishinaabe people, we talk about how like art isn't a separate thing from who we are. It's integrated into everything that we do. The way that we make things beautiful has a purpose, and it has like a spiritual purpose too, in really connecting us more to our ceremonies, to the way that we live our lives, and like the way that our year goes through the cycles of our different practices. They all also have their own arts and cultural practices that are deeply embedded into them. But yeah, and then in Minneapolis, you have one of the most dense urban Indian populations in the country. So it's a really good combination of those two things, where it was always recognized that art was like a critical component of doing the work in our community, in building with each other. So yeah. And then obviously with the things that have happened in Minneapolis over the past 5 years, especially with police violence, incorporating cultural practices into those moments has been, I think, one of the only ways our community has gotten through it. Like the day after Philando Castile was murdered, some of my friends and I we were some of the first people at the scene afterwards, and we went like to a protest space, and it didn't feel right. And so we decided the next day, we just, without a permit, went and painted like a set streets in Minneapolis, shut down the street. We had a huge community meal and invited people to paint with us. And that spot became kind of like a landmark for people to come to that wasn't concentrated on like the police state, or, it was really just about building and being with each other. So that's also been really impactful in my life as an artist for the past few years.
Thanks so much for sharing that story. So, you've been working on various justice issues, water, climate, beyond, like you were just sharing, for quite some time, and including your current gig at the 100% campaign and for Honor the Earth. And folks may not know this, but you've also worked on campaigns for some of the most progressive voices in this country, including for Ilhan Omar's campaign and for Julian Castro's presidential campaign, as a creative director and a digital strategist and director. And would love to hear, given these different spaces you've been in, what is the role of art in organizing and moving people to taking action?
Yeah, I think it's more important than ever, because people are rightfully disempowered and disengaged and disenfranchised in the process right now, right? Like people have been told that if you just vote, everything will be better for so long. And obviously people are seeing now that it's not, right? We got the right guy in office, and he's doing nothing for us. So I think that because of that, and just also with the climate crisis, being so profound and causing so much grief for people, and in that light things only becoming worse, that it's so incredibly important that we develop processes and engage with people who can really be visionaries. And I'm trying to use the word visionary more than artist lately, because to me it's like the my mentor Ricardo, who a lot of you probably seen his work. He's like one of the most famous like movement artists for forever. He talks about how like people in power want us to feel hopelessness. Like that makes it easy for them to stay in power. It makes us unlikely to resist. And so that one of the most radical things that we can do is like to be optimistic and to have hope. And we're working on a video piece with him right now about that. And I just think that like that's the only way we can bring people into political spaces right now. It's one of the only ways that we can, engage with folks and let them know that there's other options. But I don't know. I have brought a few of these little. So right now with 100% campaign, we're working on a campaign called Seasons of Citizenship, where we're talking about how like we're contextualizing voting as just like one thing we do. Instead of saying this is the answer, we're saying, okay, well, and then in this part of the year, we do accountability work at the Capitol. In this part of the year, we do mutual aid. We build on our blocks in the summertime. So we went through and like made like a seasonal life for what it means to be an engaged person in your community. And so every month, people get an artist designed postcard with some kind of different call to action. We're calling them organizing missions. So I have some of those postcards, and we worked with all like Black and POC artists. This is one of my favorite illustrators. His name's Andres Guzman. And there's just like, the goal was to actually create like pieces of mail that people would want to keep. We also designed an artist designed planner that I've put together now for 2 years. So people every day have like new art about climate. They have actual calls to action. They have explainers about how the legislative session works and what we're fighting for at the legislature. So I could talk forever about how to connect like arts and organizing, but this has been my favorite thing lately, because it was like we just wanted to redefine like what political mail meant, and really recontextualize it for folks in a way that like they would be excited to get it. And then like each one on the back just has like an organizing mission that's really simple, and they're not all electoral work. Yeah, that's just one thing. That's literally like all that I've done. I developed a political wing of Rhymesayers, which is a indie hip hop label, where we would go to concert festivals and actually engage with people not about voting, but about like what issues do you actually care about, and how do we connect you to power, like surrounding those issues. That was like the main thing I did at Rhymesayers, was really like working with artists like Brother Ali and Atmosphere around like, how do you actually get your fans to plug into these issues, instead of just kind of casually saying like racism is bad. How do we give artists the tools they need, instead of kind of like Axel was saying, like not asking them to be accessories at the end, but really saying, what do you care about, and how do we help you empower your fans? So yeah, I'll stop now, because like I said, it's my favorite thing. I can talk all day.
Great. That's why we're here. It's okay. By all means, share your passion. I wanted to touch on, you also have said that you're an installation artist, or that you have some experience with that. Are you working on something for that right now? I think that you said you were, right?
I'm working on a huge project for the Northern Spark Festival in Minnesota, which is called Minnesota 2055. And it's, I don't know how many of you are familiar with solar punk, but when I was in like my deep, dark doom last year, I discovered the solar punk movement, which was really like started as an aesthetic movement of like this idea that the future didn't have to be a nightmare. And that if we actually like harness technology for good and like remove capitalism, remove the connection between capitalism and technology, that we have this huge ability to rebuild sustainable societies. So what we're doing at Northern Spark is creating like basically a demonstration project of what urban like solar punk spaces can look like. We hired an illustrator to do a bunch of illustrations of like familiar geographic places in Minneapolis reimagined in a solar punk way. And then we're working with some young artists to design like clothes and accessories that people can wear that are like solar punk inspired. So like made out of natural fibers, dyed with natural things, a lot of repurposing of different items, like coming up with like mask fashion of like how do we actually like embrace masks as the air becomes more polluted, and then people can like take, so the idea is that they'll write themselves a postcard from the future, like about why that future is worth fighting for, what they're looking forward to, and then before the elections we'll actually send them back their postcards, and they can also like take these photos in this solar punk setting, those are the digital postcards, to remind themselves that like the future doesn't have to be shit. Like we can actually fight for something, and it can be beautiful. And also it's really cool because a lot of solar punk existing things prioritize Indigenous vision. Like, and I just started a podcast that premieres next month that's called We Keep the Fire, which is an Indigenous climate vision podcast, where we talk to mostly Indigenous women, queer people, and non-binary folks about like what they're already doing to build what we say, like to dream that next world into existence. So Indigenous doulas and people who are rebuilding food systems. Yeah. Lots of stuff.
Chills. All of it. Amazing. Thank you so much, Ashley.
You can learn more about the podcast
exciting.
at wekeepthefire.com. Just gotta plug it.
That's right. Sade can drop the link. That's awesome. I've been looking forward to it. I'm excited to hear the first episode. So just another thing to touch on is last year you went with a delegation of Indigenous leaders to COP26. And I mean, following you on Twitter and Instagram, saw a lot of you going to demonstrations and these talks. You had a roundtable panel with folks. Just wanted to check in with you about how did that experience feel, and how do you feel that the community, the global community in these forums can better center the leadership of Indigenous folks and also Indigenous artists as visionaries for climate justice?
Yeah, COP was a kind of brutal experience in a lot of ways. Obviously, after like the uprising in Minneapolis, I have a lot of trauma. I mean, it's the trauma started a long time ago with the police, but it was hard to be at COP and be surrounded by police all of the time, just like literally everywhere. And there, there was more fossil fuel executives at COP than there were Indigenous people. Like the entire Indigenous cohort from around the world, there was less of us than there were fossil fuel executives. And it was like so incredibly depressing to learn that. But for me, COP, the power in it was really just to build with other Indigenous people. And there was a lot of art also that was happening that was proximate to COP, that was happening around Glasgow and Edinburgh. But there was just a lot of incredible work that happened from Indigenous people there, especially from a delegation of women from British Columbia who are all fighting logging up in BC, and have faced, they're all like 19 to 24 and have faced so much violence. And it's kind of like off the beaten path. And so none of that's really been covered. And then to hear also, I think the most powerful moment at COP for me was hearing from a woman from Ecuador who has been fighting logging in the Amazon. And it was like this really cloudy, blustery day by the river in Glasgow. And she sang this song that her people sing in ceremony because one of her friends, they had received an award for their environmentalism. And then on the way home from the award ceremony, her friend was murdered in connection to her work. So just really understanding that, especially in the global South, the work that we do up here is even more life and death. Like fighting Line 3, fighting, DAPL, we saw so much violence, but to just remember that like in a lot of parts of the world, people are being, you know, targeted and murdered for this work was important. And it was important context setting, you know, the urgency for most people in the States and in the North and in Europe, the urgency is not that real yet, you know, but to see women down there who are fighting for their families' homelands, you know, to save it from logging, from cattle farming, the rest of COP was all kind of a shit show publicity fair, and I hated it. But I got to also bird dog the head of the Bezos Earth Fund, so that was also my other highlight. I got to yell at him from the crowd and like get on the mic and hold him accountable. So that made it worth going, I guess. They didn't advertise he was going to be there. I was like, there should be an action going on right now. But like I didn't even know who he was. I just Googled it. Because it was at the New York Times Climate Center. I Googled his name to see if I should stay for that panel. And like no one stayed. There was like 12 people there. And there was no other activists there. And so I was just like on Twitter, like, what do I do? I'm all alone. There should be an action. So yeah.
We need that energy. Yeah, I resonate with what you were saying around the urgency in the global South. My family lives in Colombia, and I hear all the time from, you know, cousins who have friends and contacts that are environmental activists and indigenous folks, and there are just unchecked assassinations that people just don't care. These people are being murdered for, you know, trying to protect the land all around the world, and it's happening right now. And it's really sobering, and it's a reminder of just the mass violence of just people who protect the biodiversity of the world and have that history and that ancestral knowledge. So thank you for sharing and for being real about what it was like at COP. That's exactly why we're here, to like connect and talk about the reality, the joy, the opportunity, but also the challenges that we're facing. So thank you. That was really powerful, Ashley. So transitioning, I wanted to hop on over to Jeannine. Jeannine, it's incredible to have you here. We had a lot of fun connecting ahead of this, and just wanted to start off by, you know, asking about, based on your experience, what is important about artists to have a seat at the table when we're organizing for climate justice, but also collective liberation, and why is it so important that they are there from the start?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jessica. Thank you for having me. I mean, artists are the key to culture. I said it earlier, you know, I believe that for myself, my ancestors called me to this work, and and it is important that we are, as artists, fighting for our collective liberation, because it is the, you know, community block parties, it's the Shakespeare's in the theater, it is the art exhibitions at the urban farms, you know, it's the movies, it's the TV. We are what create culture in this world. And, you know, the collective liberation part for me is just also being a part of my ancestors' wildest dreams, which was to be free, which was to be in community and thrive. So as an artist, I do take that really serious personally. And that's why I love and I'm just so grateful to be a part of the Center for Cultural Power, because that is the work that we do. And we do recognize that this is the moment for artists to leverage our songs, our visuals, our music videos, you know, our paintings, our murals, to just really reimagine the world in what it could be, without racism, without colonization, and with this like regenerative and relationship to the earth, because of all that she gives us. Yeah.
Beautiful. So you had shared, I believe at the top of this, how you're of Congolese and Filipino descent, and would love to hear a little bit more about your personal story, given your layered experience. And when did you start to connect, your passion for your art and for the environment and the earth?
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, my dad is from Kasai, Congo, and immigrated here because of the just like unrest that was happening, in the, even still to this day, but so much in the 70s and 80s. And my mom, of course, immigrated here to create a different life than what they had on our small island in the Philippines. And I'm definitely a product of that. I think that me coming into this world, having an immigrant parent, but being a Black American, being born here, and that's what I'm perceived as every day. I did have to really fight and toil with my identity. And that's what created the actual soil for me to grow up out of, because so much of my artistic practice, so much of my artistic experience has been, writing poetry about the intersectional stories of my family, writing music about my, Black queer outdoors experience, and just even starting an urban farm at 19, I realized that, oh, wow, this farming and growing and being in community is what my grandmother did, my mother's father, and what my great grandfather did. So it was not out of line with, like, again, their wildest dreams of what they wanted for me. But the art moment, when those two things aligned, I just randomly went to a Saul Williams show. He's an amazing poet. And I was like, you know what, Saul, I had been doing this farm, but I really love poetry. And he was like, that is your poem. That is your song. That is your art. This is your new medium. So take whatever it is. If your shovel is your new brush or your new pen or your new sword, then that's how you need to proceed from now on. Don't think those two things are outside of each other. And in that same time, I got to understand that being both African and Filipino aren't outside of each other as well. So, even being able to go to the Philippines and see the people of my island and how they reflected me so much. I was at odds with all these two different things. I'm an artist, I'm a farmer, I'm African, I'm Filipino, I'm queer, I'm in the world. So those moments of connection, of understanding that I'm at the intersection is, again, what I think has brought me to this moment, and is again why I'm so thankful to be at this, grateful to be at the Center for Cultural Power, because that is what we focus on, is the intersectional storytelling and creating art and content and supporting artists who are also at those intersections. That has been, some of my favorite moments on when I came to that understanding. And I've also just have tried so many different art mediums, from graffiti art to, composing digitally on like Ableton, or taking like sounds from the atmosphere and making that into music, as well as learning the piano. Painting as well. So it's really just being open to what my ancestors continuously give to me, and feeling like I'm responsible within those messages to make it apply to things like climate, things like social justice, because that's what they said. That's what they said. And I definitely am moved by my ancestors, whether it be from my family or folks like Harriet Tubman, Octavia Butler, even my partner's ancestors, were farmers and artists and community builders. So I pull from all of that within my experience.
Stunning. I love it. You truly are an infinite artist. Like you describe yourself, just so many different modes of expression. Incredible. Thank you so much. And also, yeah, shout out to Octavia Butler. Big fan. Love it. Speaking of solar punk too, like just all of it, it's all like coming together, and I'm feeling these themes like between all of us and what we're sharing. And it's been on my mind quite a bit too, as somebody who experiences quite a lot of existential dread. So this is just feeding me personally. So thank you, everybody. This is amazing. So that said, Jeannine, you also have more in the works. Can you share about your upcoming project, Rugged Queer Diaries, or any other projects that you want folks to hear about while we're here?
Yes. So my first upcoming project is the WNBA mixtape. I've been a basketball player all my life, and I just have loved it. And women's sports is really important to me, and it's on the rise in this moment. So I'm going to be making a mixtape with a bunch of different people from the basketball world, just talking about women's sports equity around, trans people playing sports and things like that. So that's not climate related, but that's like coming out soon. And Rugged Queer Diaries, that is going to be a musical project as well. But during the pandemic, right in the beginning, my partner and I, we lost our home, and I think it was the day of the shutdown. So we got married here in Joshua Tree and have a small piece of land that we got for our wedding. And we decided to take the journey across country from Philadelphia to Joshua Tree to live on our land. And while everyone was inside for the first, 90 or 100 days, we were living outside in a tent, out of our van. And I was making some music in that time, and my wife creating art and choreographing dances. And I thought that now having a home would really move some of that trauma around, but I realized that it just didn't, because I've experienced houselessness in so many different iterations. I needed to heal it in a different way. So Rugged Queer Diaries is going to be a moment of just like healing for me around what it was to live outside during the pandemic, what it is to be living off grid currently here in Chemehuevi land, what it is to, be a steward of sacred pieces of land of this earth, and what it is to be queer in all of those experiences. Because I think just as a human, needing housing, needing food, needing these basic needs is one thing, but being Black and queer while you're doing it, as well as having children, it is just another such heavy and layered experience. So for me, this album or this piece of work will be a moment of healing around that. And I know so many people who also experience houselessness in that time that are also queer and of color. So I really hope that folks will be able to resonate around it. And because outdoor inclusivity, climate, environment all play into my story, I do think that it is a climate narrative for sure, and that I hope it comes across that way, because that's the information that I want to give from it. Because things like houselessness, are a climate issue. And it's an intersectional issue as well, because it also does come to race and identity. So I'm really excited for that. I thought I was gonna be ready to have it out this year, and just moving through all of that art is taking a little bit more time. So, I'm on my Rihanna with it. I'll give it to y'all when, when it's ready. So yeah, thank you so much for just wanting to know more, and for everyone listening in.
Beautiful. Yeah, it all interconnects. Thank you so much, Jeannine. That was really powerful as well. Let's move next to Marcus. So Marcus, you've said that you see your art as a way to give back to your people and as a way to embody your passion for environmental justice. Can you give us like a real life example, a story of how that came to be and manifested through one of your projects or collaborations?
Yeah, definitely. When I first, like before I had started graphic design, I come to learn that representation matters, for all of our communities, for whether it, whatever art form that we're pursuing. And so prior to beginning graphic design, I kind of saw a need for Pueblo indigenous representation, for my community, kind of within the more contemporary traditional art forms. And there's awesome graphic designers at the time that really inspired this kick of representation, this inspiration. Some of them were like the NTVS. I don't know if y'all know about the natives. They provide really awesome indigenous representation and graphic work. Another one was OXDX as well, and it was they're Dene owned, Navajo owned, and I have relatives here too, some really good friends, and one of my coworkers and his brother who own Reclaim Designs. And so these, all of these have inspired, leading up to the point of really bringing representation to my people, and also just being able to create content of things that I'm passionate for and give it back to my people as well. And so I guess at the start of, really this journey of graphic design, I was able to meet my relatives at Pueblo Action Alliance, and they were, they're a grassroots women-led organization, indigenous-led organization here in New Mexico, otherwise known as Tiwa territory, Albuquerque. And so within that work, we were able to really collaborate on and really bridge together the environmental justice work along with the artwork that I was able to contribute, as a community of Pueblo organizers. And so one of the projects that I do want to share in collaboration that really did speak to bridging the representation and the environmental justice is a zine that we created through Pueblo Action Alliance, and it's covering Chaco Canyon. And so just for a little bit of context, Chaco Canyon is a very special place for my ancestors and for all Pueblo ancestors. It was a central gathering place for many of the tribes here in the Southwest. And so right now, the whole purpose to make the zine out of addressing these issues was really to provide up-to-date information that was regarding the current and political, physical, and spiritual environment from the, what's happening with the extractive industries that are trying to frack for oil and gas on our ancestral lands. And so I actually have a copy of the zine. And so we titled it Chaco Will Never Be Ruins. And so this was the first collaboration that we were able to work on together. And this is something that incorporates Pueblo representation through visual and also just through perspective and content. These can all be found at puebloactionalliance.org as well. But just statements that really educated our community and really provided content for our people, and people, it's all good. People that, represent our children, those who are actually being affected by fracking within our communities. Another one that we really, we printed out and wanted to distribute to our communities was our people dressed in our traditional clothing, because oftentimes when we see in the classroom and in a Western academic setting, we usually see these, these white bodies being portrayed within health. And so we really wanted to bring back a representation, but also show, the people who it actually affects here in the Southwest, So we really, to really just bring home exactly what representation, what speaks specifically to our community, but also what contributes to the environmental justice movement. And so through that, I got to learn a lot of the organizing aspects, being able to bridge that graphic design work with the organizing. It was very effective. And I think for one, it really did speak to our Pueblo communities. It spoke directly to our land, our waters, and then it spoke directly to our, Chaco Canyon, our ancestral sacred site. And so that was something that continues to be distributed, and hopefully, it's a helpful tool and it's transformative. So hopefully that we can, in the future, it can be more conversations can be had about the work and how design can actually, really communicate these points moving forward.
Thanks so much, Marcus. Could you share, given the framework of water and our work together when you were still with Pueblo Action Alliance, could you share how water has significance in your art and also with your community and its meaning?
Yeah, definitely. So, just like every, the movement, water is life. That's not just like a metaphor or just a tagline, it's truth. Water is, for our Pueblo communities, we've always had, and with throughout our stories too, we've always had a strong relationship and connection to water, whether that's through rain or if it's through water, or if it's through rivers or lakes that are nearby our communities. And even on a map, if you were to pull up like a tribal, our tribes, how they sit throughout our lands and our territories, all of our Pueblos sit really closely to the river. And through that, we want to always center, whether we're in ceremony and in story and also understanding of our core values, water is always at the center of everything that we do. And so we want to be able, as a designer, as a Pueblo graphic designer, I want to always center as a reflection of our ways of life. I want to be able to center water as a reflection of that, and how we are taught to honor water, and how, the relationships that we have and the specific ceremonies that we carry can be carried forth in a good way. And even if that's transferred over to like a contemporary medium such as graphic design, digital artwork, hopefully it can be something that continues to be carried forth. And there's also just specific designs that are within our Pueblo community that represent water. There are specific symbols that speak directly to our community that portray water, and that's, those designs actually belong to the people. It doesn't belong to one person or to myself, just because we use them. It's community. It's a communal and ancestral symbol that has been passed down generation to generation. We see these symbols in pottery that, date back way before even colonial period. And so we see, to carry on those images of water and rain clouds and rainbows and rivers, it's not just for the modern design or usage as itself, but it's mainly carrying on these generations of teachings that were carried and passed down to us as well. So yeah, and I'm pretty sure, I think we're going to have some visuals too in a little bit of an example of that.
Yeah, it's a perfect segue. Thank you so much for sharing that, Marcus. This is a perfect transition. I'm excited to share one of your projects that you worked on that we got, had the opportunity to chat about while you were with Pueblo Action Alliance. Folks should see on their screens an example of something that Marcus worked on. And this was for one of Pueblo Action Alliance's current ongoing campaigns called Water Back. And it's a campaign that's about reimagining our relationship to water as a living entity, and also how we can better design our water systems to be looking through an Indigenous feminist lens. And you've shared with me, Marcus, and others about the importance of Pueblo femme leadership with this project, and just generally in your culture. Can you share, as a cis man, how you got through this creative process and what that partnership and collaboration looked like with the Pueblo femmes that were part of the design process?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was super. I was definitely in a learning position, to learn from our leaders within Pueblo Action Alliance. And so I guess the first step was really understanding what water back meant, and sitting down with our director and our environmental justice organizers. They, the heart and soul of water back is rematriation, bringing back leadership, femme and women leadership under, when we're talking about water management, specifically in the Southwest. And so sitting down and learning, of the specific ways that haven't worked in the past, moving forward to our waters, because our rivers are lower, and we do have, there, because of fracking and because of these extractive industries, there's also water being polluted, it's being ruined, for our communities. We're not able to actually use healthy water from our lands anymore without using Western systems that have been provided for us. And so I can't speak directly to the organizing part and the parts that are carried, like the heart of Water Back in the campaign as it's leading forward. But as the creative process, we were able to, just like any other project, we were able to sit down and have a creative brief session and, really talk about what are the symbols that we want to see integrated within this campaign, and for an effective campaign or even movement, artwork is, it's the heart, of what we were trying to carry forward. And we really, I think it really, as a Pueblo person as well, having history of having, a revolution in 1680 and carrying it forward, as people's, artwork was a tool it used in the revolution, and so we want to be able to carry that forward as well within the campaigns that we do, whether it's protecting Chaco Canyon and moving forward with rematriation of our water in the Southwest. And so within this, this specific design, the rain clouds that you see are actually, those are the designs, one of the symbols that represent water to our Pueblo communities. And so right away, our leaders, our women that were organizers, they were like, we really need to really represent Pueblo images that speak to our communities, because the images of just regular water or the images or pictures of just water isn't enough to really speak specifically and communicate what we're trying to say to our communities. And so really bridging the movement of land back, to water back, because here in the Southwest, it's really crucial that we spread this message that we literally cannot have our land back if we don't have our water back, because water management is definitely a huge topic, especially with the cannabis industry coming in and not having consent from tribal nations about water usage within that as well. There's a lot of intersections that are happening right now with this specific discussion. And so we really wanted to just provide all of the symbols that we can put really integrate and really having people understand what Pueblo representation of water looks like, and moving forward, how can that be transformed as well. And so this is the branding, I guess, or like the look and feel, you can say, of what Waterback is right now. And you can also find this, the full Waterback page and statement and manifesto at puebloactionalliance.com or .org. And yeah, that's kind of, that's more of, how the creative process really came in, and understanding how really a lot of, as men and leadership specifically here, even within our tribal nations, it's vital that women leadership, that men step back, in this specific section and this specific topic of environmental justice when dealing with water. And so I got to learn a lot from our director at Pueblo Action Alliance. Her name is Julia Bernal. She's from Sandia Pueblo, and she's from Tiwa. She is Tiwa, so that she's in her territory. And so learning from her, and along with our EJ workers, our EJ organizers, this is a very vital movement, and hopefully there can continue to be more conversations both on the political level, but also on the grassroots and nonprofit level as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Marcus. I always love hearing about Waterback, and we love Julia and the work of PAA. So definitely recommend folks to check them out. They have the teeth that we need right now, and it's incredible to see that leadership come through so strongly. So wanted to share a little bit more about Marcus's work. He was kind enough to put together this collage. And you have, so just leading into that, so you have your own brand, like you mentioned, called Hot Sea Designs. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but given that, could you explain a little bit about what that word means, and anything that you want to say to speak to the work that we're sharing here, or if there's anything else you want to share that you're excited with folks to know, please take us home, let us know what you.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you, Jessica, for this little, I won't spend too much time. I know I'm going over a little bit, but Yeah, definitely. My so Hatsi means land in our Laguna language here in my tribe. And so Hatsi Designs is really supposed to be integrating the land and how that is important within our ways of life, but also integrating aspects of the land within artwork as well. And so what's provided on the screen is really just examples of how the land is integrated within my work, whether it's pottery and the clay that comes from the earth, you know, and even the paint and the red sands that we use to paint traditional pottery. Of course, these are all contemporary mediums. All of the things that use, all of the designs on top are all stickers that I have. And right now there's a clan sticker series, which I'm trying to cover like the different clans within my community as a way of representation, as that ties back to land-based work, right? And so specifically within design. But yeah, I just wanted to provide a little bit more too of context of the designs and how they're integrated, and specifically giving my community, you know, representation through these contemporary mediums, because, you know, we can never have too much representation when it's accurate and done correctly with respect. And so we definitely, you know, want to move forward doing that and contribute what I can in collaboration as a freelance artist. I no longer work with Pueblo Action Alliance, but there's definitely opportunities to collaborate in things such as the zine, you know, and also with the Water Back campaign. There's definitely those avenues that I'm passionate about and wanting to move forward and really just providing representation, and also the passions for EJ and also social justice as well. So thank you again for this opportunity, Jessica. I really appreciate it. And thank you everyone. Sade, thank you for being on here as well, Axel, Ashley, and I think Jeannine hopped off already, but yeah, just definitely really thankful to be part of this.
Of course. So we went a little bit over the panel discussion, but we still have time for Q&A. We wanted to dedicate a good chunk. So please, by all means, we're ready. If anyone wants to ask any questions of our panelists, we still have time to the top of the hour. So keep them coming.
Hey, Jess, we have a question for our panelist. Question is, colonialism and capitalism have cast our land and water as commodities to be mined, drilled, owned, bought, bottled. Can you talk about the importance of rebuilding our relationship to the earth and our movements and the role of creatives?
I'd love to answer that one.
Thanks, Ashley.
Yeah, so I'm actually, I just finished a video project with a Dakota artist named Gracie Horn, where she shares a story from the Dakota people about this great race that the creator had with these different animals, and how basically like through this race, humans committed to protecting animals. And that's been a really important part of how I've been thinking about like not just decolonizing, but re-indigenizing the work that I do, and like the movements that I'm part of, has been like, how do we keep reframing the narrative around why we actually care about the planet? And so for me as an Anishinaabe person, like in our language, we have both animate and inanimate. Instead of having two genders, that's our gender in our language is either animate or inanimate. So like that kind of stuff, like really talking about the cultural work of why we care. It's not just like an ethical value, right? It's that we have this like deep connection to the land, and like in our language, we actually like conjugate when we talk about water or when we talk about trees. You use the same kind of verbs that you would use talking about people, and so I think that kind of stuff, like to really have that paired with like, and then also being blatant, right, about the colonialism and capitalism side of things, but pairing it in a way that isn't just like a negative thing against capitalism, but is really uplifting what those traditional values are. And also not just that, but like how recent our ancestors were living in alignment with those values, right? So like my great grandma or like my grandma, when she was born, like Native people weren't citizens of this country yet. And she grew up like in the bush, speaking Ojibwe as her first language, cross-country skiing into town to get things. And so just like as much as we can do to disestablish the idea that our current situation is permanent and that capitalism and industrialism is the only solution, I think is like that is the work we have to do to actually get people to see other possibilities. And that was one of the reasons like why I fell in love with solar punk too, is because it allows us to actually talk about how should we be in relationship with the earth and how can we get back to that without there's so much like environmentalism that's like, well, we just have to return to these like simple ideas to go back to living a certain way, or we have to do whatever. It's like, how can we actually use this time, this like time of urgency as a real catalyst to rebuild and like we say like rematriate, to actually reanalyze how we can use our current technologies to get us close to that vision.
That was awesome. Thank you, Ashley.
Yes, thank you, Ashley. That was incredible. We have another question from Madison. Asks, how do you recommend that coordinators working in the nonprofit space recruit local artists and/or artists from communities impacted by our causes for communication campaigns?
I can take a pass at that. I think depending on your organization, obviously it takes capacity and resources to do anything. So off the jump, that's really the first thing that comes to mind. I think one thing that we found successful was having either a role or a team dedicated to that kind of work. And if you can't afford a full FTE, then make it part of someone's work plan. Someone who is associated with either community work or whatever that role looks like in your organization. But just making sure that there is time dedicated to making those relationships, reaching out to community groups and residents and artists, right? Like we were fortunate enough to have support from some foundations that understood the importance of arts and culture strategies in our work. And so we were able to get robust funding to have a team, multiple roles, be able to have deep partnerships. And I know that not every organization has the capacity to do that, which is also a call to funders, right? To funders who are in that nonprofit and arts and culture space to also think about equity and the importance of those community partnerships. And so it goes from all the way from funders to nonprofit organizations to the artists and community residents themselves. And there has to be a through line and making sure that the resources are getting to the places that they need. And so really it's about relationships. You can bring someone in, either a consultant or whatever, and it doesn't have to be that expensive consultant. It can be someone from the community and pay them like they're an expensive consultant, right? Because they do have the expertise and the knowledge and the understanding of their culture, and that's what's going to get you that robust, I think, work and product and process that you're really looking for. And so we were blessed enough to have someone who was really connected with community and was able to make connections. Jeremy Liu was, he's very connected with many folks, and so if you needed something, you'd be like, Jeremy, who can we contact? And you'd be like, oh, this person does great work in XYZ or whatever. So having someone who's a connector, I think, is really important. And other than that, I think just making sure that folks are dedicating the capacity and resources to be able to engage, this work in a meaningful way.
Awesome, Axel. Thank you for sharing those tips with us. Another question for our panelists. Axel mentioned the importance of engaging artists early. I'd love to hear from Ashley and Marcus what an effective partnership looks like for them with cause-based organizations.
For sure. Yeah. Definitely for me, an effective relationship for cause-based organizations and dynamic, I think, is definitely working with organizers who I think shares similar core values, and also similar, I guess I could say, like, even similar politics, like, views. um and within my experience, it definitely, as a designer who worked on a cause-based organization, it really is vital for the designer as well, like, to be completely aligned, politically, and also what the organization stands for. Because it's deeper than just creating the artwork. It's definitely embodying, the energy put forth into it that can really make a difference within the community and the scope of work. And I think my experience with Pueblo Action Alliance was definitely one very unique, because of it was an all Pueblo organization. And so we all, even though we come from different Pueblos in our communities throughout, in different tribal nations, we all have very similar core values and outlooks on and worldviews. So I think that definitely is one aspect that I would highlight in really just, I guess, having an effective partnership, and just aligning and being, like, on the same level and same wavelength.
Yeah, I think I'll start from like just the very beginning and say that like um one thing I keep learning as I get older is that a lot of funders are much more flexible than you think they are. Like if you can be proactive and really have like a clear definition of what your theory of change is, that you can actually get a lot of funders to go a lot farther than they'll say in a proposal. And then also a lot of funders, once you start like being the innovator that they know, will start giving you unrestricted funds because they want to see, like they want to put their name on new work. So cultivating relationships like that is super key. And then I think the other main thing, like so much of my experience of like the way organizations work with me as an artist guides how I now work with other artists, because a lot of the work I do right now is commissioning artists to do more work for organizations. So like really remembering that your timelines need to be reflective of like how much you respect these artists that you're working with, and that like so it can't be like we need you to do this in 3 days, right? You should be building these things. One thing I suggest to organizations is to kind of content bank from artists. So instead of having them hiring them for a specific project, like say you're a water organization, hire an artist to create a bunch of spot illustrations for you that are related to like representative of your community. And then that way, if you have quick turnaround, you have a bank of things, and like license them to reflect the use that you'll get from those things. So it's basically like commissioning fancy clip art, so you can have your designers play around with those things, and really make it on brand for you and have it be respectful to the artists. And then the last thing is like really just remembering that like artists are creative people who have solutions, and going to them and asking for them to give you the what they think they can do to be impactful, right? So if you're working with a poet or a musician, like be like, how do you, here's what my goal is, how do you envision interacting with this, what ideas do you have, and like really let them lead. One amazing thing that we got to do in Minneapolis when I was working for the city, is we have a project called Creative City Making. We actually hire artists in residence within city departments. So an artist like works for like 3 months in the city clerk's office on like the voting and elections management team. And then they come up with a project that actually is like an art project that further advances the goals of that department. So like one of the campaigns that we did was called Bus Stop Democracy, where we actually had like artists and poets in the busiest bus stops throughout Minneapolis, like reading poetry, talking to people about like serving on neighborhood boards and like being part of the elections process, and then just like making art for people who were waiting for the bus. and that all came from the artist in that department, you know. And I think that's just like so critical, is let them give you good ideas.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashley and Marcus, for sharing those with us. We have a couple of more questions. So I'll hop on those. This one is from Maritza. Thank you so much for all the hope and wisdom y'all have shared today. Does anyone have any more ideas for how we can frame the importance of bringing in artists and visionaries at the start of projects, or questions that we can ask of our organizations so we can slow down and value the process journey of these collaborations instead of just the product?
I can definitely speak to that for a second. You know, the work that we do at Center for Cultural Power is commission artists to be a part of conversations around issues like climate, gender justice, health justice. And I think something that I've learned here so far is that it's important to understand why you are commissioning this artist. And it's important to, if you have art that you are going to commission from an artist, to have a place where that art is going to live that really supports that artist. Sometimes I've seen in organizations, they might commission an artist and the art might just live, you know, some deep place in the website that's not in the forefront. But I think even myself as an artist, knowing that the organization that I'm working with is supporting me, knowing the organization that we're working with is compensating, you know, fairly. These are a couple of the largest questions to ask when engaging artists. And I'll definitely echo a lot of what folks said before, is just, you know, making sure you have a reason, making sure that you know, you're organized while working with this artist, thinking of them as you know, not necessarily a celebrity, but just like an important icon in the community. And I think collaborations could be a lot more successful with some of those questions of just like asking why, where, and how are we going to come at this process equitably. A lot of times organizations are like, yes, let's work with artists, let's do it. And then, you know, folks get $50, folks get $250. These are people's lives. And this is work that people have been doing for a really long time, or even an emerging artist, investing in them. So that's a question that you guys can think of as well as folks who are working in arts organizations is, are we working with an emerging artist? And do we have the time, space, and patience and resources to support them in their emergence? Or are we working with a developed artist that's high level, and do we have the correct resources to approach them with, and enough time and space to treat them with respect? So I think those are a few questions that you all could be able to ask as you guys are trying to understand what it's like to engage artists when it comes to movement building.
I think I think that's great, Jeannine. And the only thing I would add to that is that unfortunately, sometimes it takes time, you know, for organizations and leadership to really get on board. Like I mentioned, you know, PolicyLink, we're on a journey to figure out what, you know, what that actually looks like and successful in the most equitable way. And many organizations are on different, you know, paths and phases of their journey. And so it can take a lot of work to really feel like you're convincing leadership or folks to actually invest meaningfully. But you just really need that one person or that team who's supportive and can help make the case. And I think, you know, some of the links that we put in the chat, just kind of building your case, getting the resources together and showing what you know, impact arts and creative work can really have on, you know, policy and nonprofit work. I think getting those tools in your toolbox and showing and making sure that you can prove that will go a long way. So unfortunately, there's no silver bullet, I would say, but yeah, echoing Jeannine's work and just making the case in that way.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you, Jeannine and Axel, for that. We have one more question. Have any of y'all done cultural strategy work with TikTok?
I can definitely uplift that one, even though I'm new here to the Center for Cultural Power. That is one of our go-tos is short form content. And we engage influencers who are sometimes outside of the scope of the social justice issue that we are talking about in the moment. And we engage artists and TikTokers and reel makers who are within the scope of climate. We have a couple things coming down the line and just released some things where a short form reel, just kind of recapping an event. So there's so many different ways to look at when you're using short form content when it comes to like TikToks and reels. But our main thing that we do is make sure that we're commissioning artists who are already creating those reels, who are already creating that content. And we know that social media, specifically right now, TikTok and for Instagram Reels, is one of the largest ways that people are consuming their knowledge, consuming their understanding of the world in so many different ways, and so much information is being pushed through those channels. So it's definitely valuable. And I think that it speaks to the time that we're in, and is a really great cultural strategy to use. And I would, depending on your demographic, but specifically it reaches a lot of people within the, I would say 15 to 30 demographic of folks who are actually consuming things on that specific platform. So yeah, you guys can look at the work that we do on Culture Strike. That's on Instagram. We actually don't have a TikTok. We just commission them from different artists. And I'd love to hear anyone else on the panel who has done that work, pick up some tips too.
Yeah, well, I worked for Julian Castro's campaign as the creative director, and we were the first presidential campaign to have a TikTok. It was very controversial at the time. And it was a fantastic place to engage with folks. It was really fun to be able to try out different techniques and try to like actually move at the speed of TikTok trends, and get to collab with the weird guy from the Washington Post on a TikTok that at the time like was the most viewed post they had ever had. So that was awesome because it was my idea. And then on Line 3 stuff, Jessica actually did a lot of our coordinating with influencers on TikTok, because there was a lot of organic Line 3 content that was there. And then I did a little bit of stop motion projects on TikTok, which were really fun to do. I mean, a lot of what I was trying to do with the Line 3 work was to break out of the kind of content we had been creating over and over again, which was like horrifying environmental image. Oh my God, everything is bad. Because we just weren't getting a lot of engagement around that. And when we started pivoting to content that was a little bit more positive or framed in other ways, we really did start seeing better results.
Thank you so much for sharing that, both Jeannine and Ashley. Yes, that was an interesting experience to, cultivate those TikTokers and reel makers for Line 3, and was really rewarding. And I highly recommend people go on the Stop Line 3 TikTok if you want to see Ashley's brilliance and her stop motion chops at work. Anyway,
You muted yourself.
Coming up on the top of the hour. Yes, I did. I sure did. Anyway, I just wanted to say that we're coming up on the top of the hour. I want to be mindful of people's time. I am going to, take us to a slide to take a look at. We did put together a survey if people have time or want to chill and hang out with us. I am going to play Oro 5's song again, Jeannine's work, for people to vibe out to. So feel free to stick around and check out that QR code. We would love, while this is fresh in your mind, if you could give us some feedback. And in the meantime, I'm just going to play some tunes and feel free to chit chat in the chat. And thanks again so much for coming. I'm going to play that and not blow your eardrums out. There you go. Feel free to chill with us. Thank you, everybody. And we would love to hear your thoughts. Thanks again.